You're standing at the edge of the field. The sun is dropping, and the machine that cost you more than your first house just went silent because the screen in the cab says it needs the dealer, not a part, not a wrench, permission. Here's what I know that most people never get told plainly. The company didn't just sell you a tractor, it sold you a lock, and it kept the only key. And I know that because for years I was the man who handed you the invoice and told you it was normal. I sat on the inside. I wore the shirt. I signed the paperwork that grounded good machines over nothing. And before this is over, I'm going to show you the exact document, dated the 8th of January 2023, that they told the public would fix everything, and I'm going to show you why it fixed nothing. If you already own one of these lockdown machines right now, this is built for you, not for some buyer 3 years from now. I still remember the morning in the spring of 2017, standing behind the parts counter, when a corn farmer named Delbert set his cap down and slid me an invoice for a little over $8,000. The failure was a sensor. The sensor cost $40. Everything else on that page was for the privilege of being allowed to fix his own tractor. He looked at me like I could do something about it. I couldn't. And that was the day I started to understand what I was actually part of. Let me tell you what really happened to Delbert, because it happens to somebody every single day in this country. His machine threw a code, not a breakdown, a code, a little line of software that decided the engine should derate, drop to a crawl, and refused to run at full power until a technician came out and cleared it. Now here's the part nobody explained to Delbert when he bought it. That code could only be cleared by a piece of software called Service Advisor, and Service Advisor lived on the dealership laptop, only on the dealership laptop. He could see the problem. He could smell the problem. He could not touch the problem, because the tool that talks to the controller was locked behind our door. So we sent a technician. The technician billed travel time from the moment the truck left our lot. He billed portal to portal, meaning Delbert paid for the drive out and the drive back, then the diagnostic fee, then shop rate that was pushing north of $150 an hour in a lot of regions. All to plug in a cable and press a button that told the tractor it was allowed to work again. The $40 part was almost an afterthought. What Delbert was really paying for was access, and access was the product. That's the thing I need you to sit with. The tool that broke his week was never the sensor. It was the decision, made in an office he'll never see, that he wasn't trusted to hold the key to his own iron. I used to tell myself we were protecting the machine. That's the story they train into you. Emission systems are complicated. Modern equipment is sophisticated. Farmers might hurt themselves. I repeated all of it. But somewhere around the third or fourth grown man standing at my counter with red eyes over a bill he couldn't afford in a season he couldn't lose, the story stopped working on me. Because here is what I finally admitted. If the goal were really to protect the machine, they'd have handed you the tool and taught you to use it. They didn't. They kept it. And a thing that is kept from you on purpose isn't protection. It's a leash. Which raises the question I couldn't shake once I saw it. Who decided the leash should exist in the first place, and when? To answer that, you have to go back before the touchscreens, back to when a Deere was just steel and diesel and a manual thick enough to prop a door, because it wasn't always like this. And that's the part that should make you angry. Go find a man running a 4040 from the early 1980s. Ask him the last time a screen told him no. He'll laugh at you. That machine has a key, a throttle, and a shop manual that assumes you are a capable adult. If it breaks, you fix it, or your neighbor does, or the independent mechanic 2 towns over does it on a Saturday for a case of something cold. Nobody asks permission. Nobody drives out portal to portal. The tractor is yours and the way a hammer is yours. Then the emissions era arrived and everything changed, and I watched it change from the inside. When the tighter diesel rules came in through the 2000s and into the 2010s, every new machine got layered with electronic controls, sensors, and control units, the makers called by different names. Now, cleaner diesel is a fine thing. Nobody wants to breathe soot. But the emissions rules became the doorway for something else to walk through. Because once the machine was full of computers, the company could decide who was allowed to talk to those computers. And they decided it was them, only them. They wrapped the diagnostic software. They locked the controllers so that even a genuine replacement part had to be electronically married to the machine by an authorized tool, and they built a wall between you and the guts of a thing you paid for in full. That's the trick, and it's so simple it's almost beautiful in an ugly way. They didn't take your tractor. They took the ability to finish the repair. You can pull the part, you can bolt the new one on, but until the approved software says the new part is blessed, the machine plays dead. A part you own, in a machine you own, that will not function until a company you don't work for signs off on it. By the middle of the 2010s, this wasn't a rumor in the coffee shop anymore, it was a movement. Farmers in Nebraska, men like Kevin Kinney and Tom Schwartz, started saying out loud what I was watching quietly at the counter. They started pushing for the plain idea that a person who buys a machine has the right to fix that machine, right to repair. 3 words the company's lawyers came to fear. And I want to be honest about my own part here, because a confession that makes the confessor look clean is just a sales pitch. I sold the promise. I told nervous buyers the technology would save them money, cut their downtime, keep them ahead of the field. I believed enough of it to sleep. What I didn't tell them, because nobody told me to, was that the same technology quietly transferred control of their livelihood out of their hands and into a service department with a quota. Which brings us to the moment somebody put it on paper, and once you see the paper, you can't unsee it. Here's where it stops being my word against theirs, because the fight left the coffee shop and went into the courtrooms and the state houses, and it left a paper trail with dates on it. Real documents. The kind that sound like buried evidence because they mostly stayed buried under headlines nobody in farm country ever saw. Start with the memorandum. On the 8th of January, 2023, the company signed a memorandum of understanding with the American Farm Bureau Federation. Big announcement, handshakes. The message to the public was that farmers would finally get access to the tools and information to repair their own equipment. To a lot of folks, it sounded like the war was over and the farmer won. Read the fine print and your stomach drops. That memorandum was not a law. It could not be enforced in any court by any farmer. It specifically did nothing to let you get around the software locks that stop a farmer from modifying settings or fully clearing certain conditions on his own. In plain words, they agreed to sell you access to their world on their terms, at their price, and in exchange the Farm Bureau agreed to back off from pushing for actual right to repair laws. It was a peace treaty that mostly disarmed one side. And I remember reading the coverage and thinking, they didn't lose, they just bought quiet. Before I show you that deepest crack, let me stop for one honest minute, because this is exactly where a man in your boots needs a real map, not just a story. Picture it. You're back at that kitchen table, the invoice face down because you can't stand to look at it again, and a piece of you is wondering if this fight is even yours to win. It is. That's the whole reason I put everything I learned on the wrong side of that counter into the complete Iron Furrow system. It's an instant download you can read tonight. The first volume, Fixed or Owned, drags the ownership myth into the light and shows you exactly what that fine print lets Deere control, then hands you 5 cash recovery moves ranked by real return and honest effort, laid over a 12-month field map that takes you from invoice shock to standing on your own. The second volume, Break the Lock, is your Year 2 plan, with concrete alternatives, documented numbers, and the right order of operations, because sequence matters more than speed. And the collection includes the exclusive third volume on machine-independent operation. Here's a check you can run for free before you spend a dime. Tonight, go read your own dealer agreement, that EULA nobody ever opens, and find the line about what you're actually permitted to fix. Read it slow. The system just told you those permissions are narrower than you think, and the paper in your own drawer proves it. The fastest way to get the books is to scan the QR code right there on your screen, or go to the link in the description or the pinned comment. And this isn't about a launch or a deadline. It's about a repair bill that's already running against you every season you stay a tenant on your own farm. Now, with that map in your hands, let me get back to the crack that came from a place nobody expected. But the quiet didn't hold, and this is the part they really didn't want you to reach. Because on the 15th of January, 2025, the Federal Trade Commission, together with the states of Illinois and Minnesota, filed a lawsuit against Deere and Company, The government's own complaint accused the company of driving up repair costs for farmers by keeping essential repair software, the fully capable version of Service Advisor, out of the hands of owners and independent shops and funneling that work to its own dealer network. Think about what that means. This is not a disgruntled defector like me. This is the nation's top consumer protection agency putting into a federal filing that the very lock I used to explain away at the counter was, in their words, harming the people who grow the food. The complaint laid out how the good version of the tool went to dealers while owners got a stripped-down version that couldn't finish the job. The exact thing Delbert lived through in 2017, now written into a federal case 8 years later, and the class actions had already been stacking up before that. Farmers pulled their lawsuits together into consolidated litigation in federal court in the Northern District of Illinois, arguing the company held an illegal grip on the repair market for its own big tractors and combines. The judge let key parts of that case move forward rather than throwing it out, which tells you the claims weren't laughed out of the room. They were serious enough for a court to say, keep going. Meanwhile, the state stopped waiting for the company's blessing. On the 25th of April, 2023, Colorado's governor signed the first agricultural right to repair law in the country. It took effect the 1st of January, 2024. For the first time in that state, a manufacturer was legally required to give farmers and independent technicians the same tools, parts, software, and documentation the dealers get. Not a handshake, a statute, with teeth. So follow the timeline the way I finally had to. The company profited from the lock. Then they signed a friendly memorandum to make the pressure go away. Then a state made it the law anyway. Then the federal government sued. That is not the arc of a company that got it wrong by accident. That is the arc of a system that was built on purpose, defended on purpose, and only cracked because people refused to stop pushing. And the deepest crack of all came from a place nobody expected, which I'll get to. But first I owe something to the man watching this who feels like none of it can help him now. Because right about here is where a lot of you are thinking, that's fine for Colorado, that's fine for the lawyers, but I'm sitting on a machine I already bought in a state with no such law, and I feel stuck. So this next part is for you specifically. The owner who already has the lock screen in the cab and thinks his only choices are pay the dealer or park it. You have more moves than they ever wanted you to know about, and I'm going to give you the real ones. Move 1, you can buy the diagnostic access yourself. This is the thing that made me feel like a fool for every year I stood at that counter. The company sells a customer version of its Service Advisor software directly to the public. You pay for a subscription, you get the software on your own laptop, and you can plug into your own machine and read fault codes, run tests, and see what the dealer sees when they charge you to drive out and look. It is not free, and it is not perfect. But for a lot of owners, it turns a mystery D-rate into a problem you can actually understand before you ever pick up the phone. The dealers rarely advertise this, and now you know why. Move 2. Get the right cable. The software needs an interface to talk to the machine's connector. Independent suppliers sell the adapters. Once you have the software and the cable, that same little code that used to hold Delbert hostage becomes something you can read at your kitchen table in the evening. Knowledge alone changes the whole negotiation because a dealer treats a man who knows his fault code very differently from a man who knows nothing. Move 3. Build a relationship with an independent mechanic now before you need one at 2 in the morning during harvest. There is a growing network of independent ag technicians who specialize in keeping this equipment running outside the dealer system, and the right to repair laws and settlements are slowly forcing more tools into their hands. Find yours before the breakdown, not after. A man with a trusted independent in his phone is a man who cannot be held over a barrel. Move 4 and write this one down. If you are anywhere near a state with a right to repair law, or you buy from a dealer that operates across state lines, you have leverage to demand the same tools and documentation those laws require, and the federal case gives you the language to ask for it by name. You are allowed to say the words Service Advisor and Fair Access and mean them. Most farmers never ask because they never knew there was anything to ask for. You do now. And here is the mindset shift underneath all 4 moves. The lock only works if you believe you have no key. The moment you own the software, know your codes, and have an independent on speed dial, the whole scheme loses its grip on you. You stop being a hostage and go back to being an owner. But even all of that is a way to survive inside their system. The real escape, the thing that has quietly become a rebellion across this country, is something else entirely. And that's the secret I saved for the end. Here it is. The most powerful thing I learned after I walked away wasn't a lawsuit or a subscription or a clever workaround. It was watching where the smart money in farm country actually went. Because while the headlines argued about software, thousands of working farmers quietly voted with their checkbooks, and they voted for iron with no software at all. Go pull the auction records. When newspaper reporters and farm economists started digging into it a few years back, they found something that made no sense on paper. Tractors from the late 1970s and the 1980s, machines 40 years old, were selling at auction for stunning money. A well-kept John Deere 4040, or a similar simple workhorse of that era, was pulling prices that in some cases climbed toward and past the values you'd expect from something a fraction its age. Farmers were paying a premium, on purpose, for old. Why would a rational businessman pay top dollar for a machine older than he is? I'll tell you exactly why. Because it's the same reason I do it myself now. That old tractor has no D-rate, no dealer-only software, no control unit that has to bless a new part. It has a shop manual that tells you everything, parts you can still get, and a design a competent person can fully repair in his own barn. It will never strand you in a field waiting on a technician to drive out portal to portal. It does the one thing the expensive new machine cannot promise anymore. It obeys the man who owns it. That is the exodus in the title. It isn't only about farmers switching to European brands like Fendt or Klaas or Deutz, though plenty are looking hard at anything that treats them like an owner instead of a renter. The deeper vanishing is this. The newest, most locked down machines are quietly being distrusted by the very people they were built for. And those people are reaching backward for iron that still belongs to them and forward toward anyone who will sell them a repair right along with the tractor. And if you ever doubted the locks could be beaten, hold on to this last piece, because it's the proof the whole scheme is a choice and not a law of nature. In August of 2022, at the Big Hacker Conference in Las Vegas, a researcher who goes by the name Sick Codes got up in front of a crowd and demonstrated that he had jailbroken a John Deere display. He got into the system and, to make the point impossible to ignore, ran the video game Doom on the tractor's own screen. A game running on the controller they swore had to stay sealed for your own good. The message of that stunt was not about a game. It was that the wall is not made of steel. It's made of policy. The machine can be understood. The lock can be opened. The only reason you've been told it can't is that somebody profits every time you believe it. And even during the war, when tractors were looted out of a dealership in occupied Ukraine, the company proved the same truth from the other direction by reaching across the world and remotely disabling them. If they can reach into a machine and switch it off from an office, then the control was always there. They just usually pointed at you. So the secret finale is really two things you can start on this week. First, if you're going to keep buying, look hard at the simple iron. The market is quietly bidding up the pre-software workhorses of the 70s and 80s, and understand you're not being nostalgic, you're buying back your independence. Second, if you're keeping what you have, get the customer diagnostic software, get the cable, learn your own codes, and find your independent mechanic before harvest. The knowledge existed the whole time. It was buried under fine print and dealer counters and men like the man I used to be. A handful of farmers and hackers and one stubborn state kept it alive. Now it's in your hands. If you take nothing else from a man who spent years on the wrong side of that counter, take this. They didn't sell you a machine and forget to give you the key. They kept the key on purpose, and they built a whole business out of renting it back to you one repair at a time. The day you stop asking their permission is the day the tractor becomes yours again, the way it was always supposed to be. You're the kind of owner who was raised to believe that a thing you paid for in full is a thing you control. That instinct isn't old-fashioned. It's the last line of defense against being turned into a permanent tenant on your own farm. Trust it. Now I want to hear from you, and I want you to actually type it out, because this audience reads and nods and stays silent, and staying silent is exactly what they count on. Tell me the worst repair invoice you've ever been handed and what the real problem actually was. The way Delbert's $8,000 was really a $40 sensor. Name the machine. Name the number on the bill. Tell me what state you're watching from and whether there's a single independent mechanic left near you who can still touch this equipment. Put it in the comments where every other owner can see he isn't alone. And if you believe a tractor should outlive the man who bought it and still answer to his family, don't just watch. Join the ones taking their iron back. Subscribe and stand with the owners who refuse to rent what they already bought. Next time, I'm going to open the dealer service manual I was never supposed to let you see and show you the exact line items they're trained to add to your bill before you ever walk through the door. You'll want to be here for that one. That silent tractor in the field, that's exactly where my membership picks up. Inside the right to repair, I walk you through the tool that unlocks any Deere step by step. Ask me your own question, and a real person, me, answers you myself. You won't be alone. Farmers like you are already inside. Just point your phone's camera at the code on your screen, and you can cancel any time. Now, if that troubled you, wait until you see the bigger mistake unfolding. In the next video, I show you how John Deere is repeating the very move that nearly destroyed Caterpillar. It's starting right now.